Have you ever wondered how far true friendship goes? And what would you do if, in the midst of your greatest pain, you had to choose between your own safety and loyalty to the one you love? The story of Jonathan, son of King Saul, teaches us about sacrifice, courage, and a friendship that defies the impossible. Jonathan had it all, the position of heir to the throne, the life of privilege, but he was able to give it all up for a greater cause. He chose to support David, the man God had chosen to reign, even though he knew it meant losing the throne and even the protection of his own father. Perhaps you too are at a time when you have to make difficult choices, where love and loyalty ask more than you can imagine giving. But Jonathan's story reveals a powerful truth: in sacrifice and faithfulness, we find purpose and peace that the world cannot offer. Prepare to experience a friendship that will touch your life in a profound way, because what Jonathan did for David, you can also do for truth, faith, and your own relationships. Before we dive into this incredible story, if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity to subscribe now and activate the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any content that can transform your life and inspire you every day. In the midst of turbulent times in Israel, when the people were clamoring for a king, God chose Saul, an imposing and courageous man. Among his sons, Jonathan stood out, the firstborn, crown prince and potential leader. Jonathan grew up amidst military training and the responsibilities of royalty. Strong and skilled, he became an excellent warrior, but his true strength lay in his character. Humble, just and deeply faithful to God, Jonathan stood out not only for his bravery, but for his faith. Alongside his father, Jonathan fought in difficult battles against the Philistines, Israel's constant enemies. However, he saw firsthand the mistakes of Saul, whose decisions were often marked by disobedience to God. Despite this, Jonathan remained loyal, honoring his father as king and accompanying him in battles. Unlike Saul, Jonathan trusted the Lord completely. He believed that Israel's strength lay not in the power of weapons, but in the presence of God. This trust would shape his life choices and make him one of the greatest examples of courage and faithfulness in biblical history. More than just the son of a king, Jonathan was a leader who lived to please the King of Kings, and his journey was just beginning. Jonathan was not only a prince by birthright, he was a natural leader. And one of the stories that most reveals his courage and faith is recorded in the episode of the battle at Michmash, when he demonstrated himself to be a true fearless warrior. The Philistines, Israel's bitter enemies, had taken strategic positions and surrounded God's people. They had vast numbers of soldiers, superior weapons, and a confidence that seemed unshakable. Meanwhile, the Israelites were disorganized, with few armed warriors and a leader, Saul, who was hesitant to act. The situation seemed hopeless. But it was in this bleak scenario that Jonathan stood out. He refused to accept that victory depended on numbers or human strength. He knew that the real battle was decided by God. So, with impressive confidence, Jonathan decided to act. He called his faithful armor-bearer and shared his bold plan, to go up to the Philistine camp and face them directly. Imagine the scene: just two men, with no reinforcements, no sophisticated weapons, facing an entire army. But Jonathan had something the Philistines did not: unshakable faith. He told his armor-bearer, "The Lord will not stop saving, whether by many or by few." 1 Samuel 14 verse 6. His words were not just words of courage, but of absolute confidence in the power of God. Jonathan and his armor-bearer advanced in secret. They climbed steep cliffs, defying not only their enemies but also the dangers of the terrain. As they approached the Philistine camp, Jonathan agreed on a signal with his armor-bearer: if the enemies invited them to climb, it would be a sign that God would deliver them into their hands. And that is exactly what happened. The Philistines, in their arrogance, called out to the two Israelites, mocking them, little knowing what was coming. With incredible skill and supernatural strength, Jonathan and his armor-bearer launched an attack that threw the enemy army into a panic. They defeated about 20 men in a short space of time. What happened next was even more amazing. God intervened directly, sending a massive earthquake. The Philistines, confused and terrified, began to fight among themselves. Chaos quickly spread, and the entire army retreated. Jonathan's courageous action not only inspired his fellow Israelites, but it also changed the course of the battle. His faith and boldness showed everyone that when God is on the side of his people, no enemy is too great. Jonathan did not fight for personal glory or power. He was driven by his trust in God and his desire to free the people of Israel. This act of bravery became a milestone in his history, cementing his reputation as a true fearless warrior and a trustworthy leader. This victory at Michmash was not just a demonstration of courage, but a testament to what God can do through someone who trusts him fully. Jonathan reminds us that true strength does not come from circumstances or odds, but from faith in the power of the Lord. During the battle against the Philistines, Saul made a rash oath: Cursed be the man who eats anything before evening, until I have avenged myself on my enemies. 1 Samuel 14 verse 24. The exhausting order affected the entire army, which became hungry and weakened as they fought. Jonathan, who had not heard the oath, found honey on the road and ate some, regaining his strength. When the soldiers told him about Saul's order, he criticized his father's decision, saying that the victory would have been much greater if the men had eaten to regain their energy. By the end of the day, the hungry soldiers had eaten meat with the blood in it, violating God's law. When Saul tried to seek divine guidance, he received no answer. So he cast lots to find the alleged culprit, and the lot fell on Jonathan. Saul declared that his son should die, but the people intervened, saying, "Jonathan has brought victory to Israel. He cannot die." 1 Samuel 14 verse 45. Saul retreated, and Jonathan was spared, but the episode revealed Saul's impulsiveness and Jonathan's wisdom, who always trusted God above all else. What do you think of this episode in the story of Jonathan and Saul? Was Saul's decision fair, or was he too impetuous? Jonathan acted wisely in criticizing his father's order, putting the needs of the army above an impulsive oath. How do you think we should deal with moments when our decisions impact others in such a profound way? Leave your comment and share your thoughts with us. We want to know what you think about this situation so full of lessons and teachings. Of all the stories of Jonathan, the one that stands out the most is his friendship with David. It was not just an ordinary connection, it was a deep bond, marked by loyalty, brotherly love, and an unwavering commitment, even in the face of adversity. This friendship began at a crucial moment in Israel's history. David was just a young shepherd boy when he defeated Goliath, the Philistine giant, with a sling and a stone. After this impressive victory, he was brought before Saul, the king, to tell his story. Jonathan, Saul's son, was there, and as he listened to David speak, he felt something extraordinary, an immediate connection, as if their souls were united. The Bible describes this connection clearly. Jonathan became one spirit with David and loved him as himself, 1 Samuel 18 verse 1. This friendship was sealed with a covenant. As a sign of his devotion, Jonathan gave David his royal robe, his tunic, his sword, his bow, and even his belt. These gifts were not just objects, they were symbols of honor, trust, and recognition that David was chosen by God for something greater. Despite being the crown prince, Jonathan did not see David as a threat, but as a brother he could trust completely. He recognized that God's hand was upon David, and rather than compete for power, he chose to support him. But this friendship was tested when Saul, consumed by jealousy and fear of losing the throne, began to persecute David. Even in the face of his father's fury, Jonathan remained loyal. He served as a mediator, trying to appease Saul's anger and protect David. When he realized that Saul's hatred knew no bounds, Jonathan warned David and helped him escape, saving his life. In one of the most moving scenes, the two friends said goodbye in secret, knowing that they might never see each other again. Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, for we have sworn to each other in the name of the Lord, saying, 'The Lord is witness between me and you and between my descendants after you and yours forever.'" 1 Samuel 20 verse 42. His words reflect the depth of their friendship and their trust in God to preserve that covenant. Even when they were separated, the bond between them never broke. Jonathan continued to serve faithfully at his father's side, but he never betrayed David. Their friendship was an example of sacrificial love, of faithfulness that transcended circumstances, and of trust in God's plan, even when God seemed distant. The friendship between Jonathan and David is one of the most beautiful stories in the Bible. It teaches us about loyalty, generosity, and the power of recognizing and supporting God's purpose in another person's life. It was a bond that overcame politics, jealousy, and even the threat of death, showing that true friendships are precious gifts given by God Himself. Jonathan's story is marked by many moments of courage and honor, but perhaps the most impressive is his decision to reject the throne of Israel, which should have been his by right. He was the son of King Saul, the crown prince, and as such, he was destined to take his father's throne. But Jonathan's loyalty and love for David changed the course of his life and the destiny of the kingdom. It all began when David, still young and unknown, defeated Goliath, the Philistine giant. David's victory brought about a great change in Israel. He quickly won the hearts of the people and the trust of Saul. However, something that seemed positive to everyone else became a threat to the king himself, Saul. His jealousy and insecurity began to grow, and he began to see David as a dangerous rival, someone who could take his place on the throne. But Jonathan, the king's son, did not see David as an enemy. On the contrary, he admired him and recognized that God was with him. Jonathan knew that David had been chosen by God to be the next king of Israel. Rather than resent David, he chose to support him, understanding that his friend would be the future leader of Israel. Jonathan's commitment to David became clear on several occasions. At a crucial moment, Jonathan made a covenant with David, promising friendship and loyalty, even if it meant giving up his own right to be king. He was not afraid to lose his throne, for he knew that David had a calling from God. In a symbolic gesture, Jonathan gave David his royal robe, his sword, his bow, and his belt, all symbols of his position as a prince. He not only gave up his possessions, but he also gave up his future as king in order to support God's plan for the nation of Israel. This decision was not easy, especially since it meant giving up the throne that would always be his by birth. However, Jonathan understood that true greatness came not from power or status, but from obedience to God. He placed the welfare of the kingdom and God's purpose above his own desires and ambitions. If you're enjoying this story and the lessons we're sharing, don't forget to leave a like. This helps us reach more people and continue bringing you content that really makes a difference. So, click the thumbs up button and let's spread messages of faith and wisdom together. When Saul, driven by envy and anger, tried to kill David, Jonathan still remained steadfast in his loyalty. He warned David of his father's plans and helped him escape. Even though Jonathan knew that this would put him at risk, he did not hesitate. To him, friendship and God's plan were more important than inheriting an earthly throne. When the time came to say goodbye, Jonathan and David embraced and wept together, knowing that as much as they longed to be together, the future would tear them apart. The pact they made was an oath of loyalty, a commitment that their friendship and promise to support each other would survive anything, even death. Jonathan remained true to this pact to the end of his life. He never tried to take the throne for himself, even though it was rightfully his. His relinquishing power to follow God's plan and support David is an extraordinary example of humility and faithfulness. When Jonathan died in battle against the Philistines, David, now king of Israel, kept his promise and honored his friend's memory. He not only mourned Jonathan's death, but he also sought out his son, Mephibosheth, to honor the covenant they had made. David brought Mephibosheth to live in the palace, gave him a place at the king's table, and treated him as a son. This action by David demonstrated that the covenant between him and Jonathan transcended death and was kept alive in his actions. Jonathan's story teaches us about sacrifice, loyalty, and true greatness, which is not measured by power or a throne, but by a willingness to serve God's purpose, even when it means giving up our own desires. Jonathan, the prince who rejected the throne, chose what was right in God's eyes, and his story continues to inspire all who seek to live humbly and faithfully. Now that you know Jonathan's story, we want to know, what touched you most about this story of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice? What do you think about the choices he made, especially when he gave up the throne and supported David? Leave your comment and share with us what you learned from Jonathan's life. Let's talk about how these principles can be applied to our lives today. And so, Jonathan's story teaches us something powerful. True friendship, loyalty, and courage are priceless. He gave up his own future, his power, and his security, all because of his commitment to David and, most importantly, to God's plan. He showed us that even in the most difficult situations, when we have to make choices, true greatness lies in putting others before ourselves. Jonathan was not only a faithful friend, but an example of how we should live our lives, with integrity, with courage, and with a heart willing to do what is right, even if it costs us something very valuable. His story is an invitation for all of us to reflect. Have we been faithful in our friendships and in our commitment to what is right? Perhaps, like Jonathan, you will need to make difficult decisions in life. And, like him, you can choose what is best, not for yourself, but for others, for the greater good. Because in the end, when we live with a loyal heart and a willingness to serve, life surprises us in incredible ways. Jonathan's story doesn't end with him. It continues in us, when we choose to be faithful, courageous, and true in everything we do. So, may we learn from him and live with the same courage, loyalty, and love that he demonstrated. Thank you for following along. May Jonathan's story inspire each of us to be more faithful, more courageous, and more committed to what really matters. If you were inspired by Jonathan's story and want to continue learning powerful lessons like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss any of our videos full of wisdom, faith, and inspiration. Click the subscribe button and activate the bell to receive notifications. Let's continue this journey of transformation together.